Okay, it's Farminar time. If you didn't tune in when we were having some conversations earlier, now's your chance to adjust your volume and get ready. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm Steve Carlson. I'm with Practical Farmers of Iowa. We're going to kick this Farminar topic off tonight, and as you know, we're going to be talking about achieving profitability with fruits and vegetables. And so we're going to hear tonight from two farmers who have looked at their marketing channels this past year and crunched the numbers, and they're trying to decide what is profitable for them and worth their time to continue with in the future. And you can see our two speakers up in the top left corner there, those happy vegetable farmers. That's Natasha Hegmann and Ryan Pesch. Ryan is going to be our first speaker. Ryan's from Lida Farm in Pelican Rapids, Minnesota. And he is also an extension educator in economic development, so he sort of works on this stuff a lot, kind of wrote the book on this. So we're glad to have Ryan tuning in from way up at Pelican Rapids. Natasha Hegmann is a PFI member, a beginning farmer. She farms at Turkey River Farm near Elkport in northeast Iowa. And Natasha just completed her second season farming on her own, and so she's going to share some numbers with us and kind of walk through how she's evaluating her market channels to adjust for the following year. And actually, Natasha's tuning in from Duluth. So going back to last week, we had 3 speakers last week, and our 2 speakers this week, everybody has been from Minnesota. So I'm starting to feel left out here at Practical Farmers of Iowa, talking with a bunch of people from Minnesota. But there's a lot of good folks up there. So thanks for sharing your knowledge. But before I turn it over to Ryan and get into this topic of the night, I'm going to talk a little bit about Practical Farmers of Iowa real quick. And if you haven't already, we like to see people, post your location in the chat box. It's fun to see where everyone else is tuning in from. I assume there's at least some Iowa people. I'm not the only person not from Minnesota. So yeah, please do that. And if you want to share there you go, Jenny. All right. If you want to share your email address, we send out a weekly Farminar update. I can put you on that list just to remind you about what topics are coming up. And as far as those topics that are coming up, we've got 4 more after tonight. That'll carry us up until around the Christmas time, and then take a couple weeks off. And then we have a winter series with another 10 more topics that starts first thing in January, and then it'll go right through March. If you do miss any of these topics, we record them, and we've got them in our archives. We have over 130 recordings of these Farminars. So if you've got a topic in mind that you're interested in, we probably have a Farminar recorded at that link there at the Farminar archive. But if you're tuning in tonight and you're interested in, profitably growing fruits and vegetables, you might be interested in that topic on December 5th. That's Jeannie McEwen, who grows flowers at Bright Flower Farm in Illinois, and she's going to talk about top 10 sellers at her farm. So that should be a good presentation too. So join us any Tuesday night, 7 o'clock. So Practical Farmers of Iowa, we are a nonprofit organization, been around for just over 30 years. We are a member-based organization. We're farmer-led. We like to say that we're a big tent because we welcome all farming enterprises, farmers from all sizes and shapes. And if you can grow something in Iowa, chances are we have members that do it, and we try to provide programming around that. So we are a diverse farming organization. Our mission at PFI is to strengthen farms and communities through farmer-led investigation and information sharing, and we do that to help farmers practice an agriculture that benefits both the land and the people. And the way we accomplish our mission is in a number of different ways. And first and foremost, we were started to conduct replicated on-farm research trials with our members. And we still have a very strong tradition of doing this through our cooperators program. So we help farmers design and implement these on-farm research trials on whatever topics or issues that they're curious about on their farm. And then we also help farmers teach other farmers about what they do, whether it's with their on-farm research trials or, just through their marketing channels like we're doing tonight. So it's a lot of farmer-to-farmer education, and that's exactly what this Farminar is supposed to do. It's farmer-led webinars. So we do on-farm field days, workshops, socials, We have a beginning farmer retreat coming up next weekend, December 1 and 2 in Indianola, Iowa. This is our 10th annual beginning farmer retreat. So if you're a beginning or an aspiring farmer, look us up at practicalfarmers.org and plan to join us in Indianola. It's a inexpensive weekend where a lot of great networking happens. It's a great opportunity to improve your farm business, set some farm goals, work towards them. So join us in Indianola next week. We are taking registration for that up until like Monday. So look for that beginning farmer retreat at practicalfarmers.org. Also, we have our big annual conference coming up in January in Ames. That's 18th, 19th, and 20th. So again, we have tons of information. Over 50 sessions are planned and announced and described in detail on our website. So check that out and join us for the big daddy of all PFI events, January 18, 19, 20. And as a member-based organization, you should consider joining us. We have a number of member benefits, but really the best benefit for being a Practical Farmers member is to join this network of other members, people who are interested in helping each other because they want to see sustainable agriculture put on the Iowa landscape and are want to see farms be profitable and efficient, and they want to see more stewardship, and that's what we focus on. So and we're not just focused on Iowa agriculture, so I kind of joke about that, but yeah, we do have members in Minnesota and Illinois and everywhere around us. So we do a lot of our programming in Iowa, but you don't have to be from Iowa to benefit from PFI. So look into our member benefits again on the website practicalfarmers.org. And then finally, a couple of quick rules. Feel free to ask our speakers using that chat box for any kind of questions that you've got. While they're speaking, it's helpful just to keep your questions on topic. Make sure that your questions are, clarifying questions. We will have about 30 minutes after both Ryan and Natasha are done speaking to go through all kinds of questions. But yeah, just be respectful of our speakers, be respectful of the other people in the chat box. Also, if you haven't noticed, in that lower left corner of our screen there is a little poll that helps us get a head count on how many people are tuning in to these Farminars. So if you're sitting there with 2 or 3 people, maybe check that box for us so we know exactly how many people are listening in. That'd be helpful. And then finally, we really appreciate any and all feedback that we can get. So that link right there is a survey to tell us about what you think about this Farminar tonight. You can click that now. It'll open in your web browser, and then later after the presentation, you can come back and fill out that survey. It should just take us, 1 minute just to tell us, if you learned something tonight. But also, that's your opportunity to tell us what topics and what speakers you want to hear in the future. So I'm planning our winter series that starts in January right now, and I take that feedback pretty seriously. So let us know what you want to hear about in the future, what you thought about tonight. We really appreciate that. So that's it for me. I'm going to get out of the way here. Ryan, I'm going to pull up your presentation, and whenever you see that, you're welcome to take it away. So thanks everybody for tuning in.
Okay. Well, I guess it's me. This is Ryan Pesch, hailing from Minnesota. Yes, the Minnesota carpet baggers are trying to take over PFI, Steve, or something. No. Anyways, I'm hailing here. I'm calling you from the extra bedroom in Lida Farm, and so it's really good to be here. And I really appreciate being asked to come kind of engage with you guys again. I did a session on marketing mix analysis and managing your marketing mix at the Granddaddy Conference last spring, and I just really enjoyed my time with PFI, both at the conference. Loved the potluck, loved everything about it. It's just a very good organization. So to be asked back to talk a little bit more and engage with you all, I'm just it's kind of tickled. It's nice to be here. So tonight we'll talk about in terms of profitability. We're going to really dig as deep as we can onto this issue about the marketing mix. See, we got a little bit of alliteration here going right for tonight. Managing your marketing mix. This thing we're going to hit on. And let me make sure I know how to do this. Ooh, there, I figured it out. The things that I'd like to cover with my time. There'll turn it over to Natasha, and then we'll have a lot of question and answer time. Want to just get us all on the same page about what we mean by marketing costs, and then I'm going to walk you through what we mean by a marketing mix analysis. How are we comparing different market channels? Because this is there's a lot of different ways of analyzing for profitability. One thing we're focusing on here tonight is not necessarily how efficiently we're producing our crops, but how we're selling the crops that we're raising. And so we're looking to go through a marketing mix analysis. And with that, I'm certainly going to share about how I've used this analysis on our own operation. And then I think most importantly, I'm going to try to go through how do we make decisions based on this kind of analysis. That's really where the rubber meets the road. We can always just run numbers in a spreadsheet all day long, but if we don't do anything with those numbers, it's really not that useful. And so I make this point about get strategic. Let's decide already. Okay, let's not just talk about some numbers. Let's use the numbers to make decisions and change how we're selling the products that we're raising. And lastly, Steve did mention I do have this other hat as an extension educator that works in economic development. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the research we had done in central Minnesota. It was about profitability of commercial vegetable operators overall, but I do have some data from those that participated about their returns by market channel. So I just thought sharing a little bit about that research since I'm on would be helpful. And so just to give you a visual about where I'm reaching you from, Lida Farm, we are a certified organic vegetable operation. For the last 4 seasons we've been certified. We've been in existence here since 2004, and you see on the right hand side with that orange circle just where we're at. We're just east of Fargo, North Dakota, in what I call the West Central Lakes District. And so Natasha's over there in Duluth, so I'm between Fargo and Duluth, right? And so we're not near any kind of major metropolitan area. You know, my kids go to school in Pelican Rapids, town of 2,500, and so we're in that western front of West Central Minnesota. On the left, you see my lovely wife Maree and our 3 kids. They're kind of the workforce, and I always joke to say that they don't work as much as you think they should. Also, I do for the last 4 years, I've had an apprentice, Kelsey Wolf, who's been working with me. And so that's pretty much all of Lida Farm. We grow a little over 4 acres of vegetables, and I'll talk a bit about how we market those products later on in the presentation. And as you'd expect, like a lot of market gardeners in the upper Midwest, it's a wide mix of products. Now, I started the presentation in Iowa this same way. I kind of like this visual. Certainly, I think if any of us that are involved in market gardening, we will feel like this guy on the right. Okay, see, he's just sort of haggard and worn out. You will at times feel like this guy. My point is, in the long term, we don't want to end up being this guy. Even though we might be tired and worn out and kind of crabby about, you know, dealing with that particular set of people or fellow vendors at a farmer's market that make us kind of crotchety and worn out, we don't in the long term want to internalize that and just sort of make that our life. This picture I got just by Googling WPA pictures Dust Bowl, Desperate Farmer Dust Bowl, and I got this guy. So instead, we want to not feel like we're trapped in the way we're selling things and not trapped in our current way of raising and selling products, but instead find a way out. So we're not desperate Dust Bowl farmer ourselves. And this is really why I end up and have recently spent a lot more time on this issue about marketing costs and doing market mix analysis, is because on the right hand side, this is the best schematic I could come up with based on my experience, what the selling life of a local food operator looks like, right? The farm is in one place, and oftentimes what I see is that we're juggling city we're juggling multiple outlets in multiple locations, all of which have real significant direct marketing costs just in terms of how we're getting product from point A to point B. So it's not uncommon for market gardeners like myself and others that I've known and worked with that are stringing together, 3 to 6 outlets in order to make this economically viable, and that they're able to juggle the sales necessary to make the farm work. And so, are all sales created equal? My major point that I'm going to emphasize here tonight is no, by no means. A dollar that we're getting, like on this schematic over the right from Elk River, which might be 60 miles away, is not worth a dollar that we're getting from North Branch, which might be 20 miles away. Just a difference in mileage in and of itself is going to make $1 worth more or instantly have a better return than the other dollar. And so I say the way that we need as local food operators to kind of think through this is to do a marketing mix analysis, which I'll show here. First, though, let's define some terms. And I always say it's important that we start by knowing thy costs. And for our purposes tonight, I really want to split up all of our costs that we have as operators into 2 camps: marketing costs and production costs. Everything it costs us to grow and make the product with production costs, and everything related to selling the product we're calling marketing costs. And so defining that, I think, is important in large part because usually when I say marketing costs, people's minds go instantly to advertising. And then people say, oh my, Ryan, I don't spend that much on advertising. This really isn't worth, I'm now shutting down and not paying attention to you. And instead, really what we're talking about with marketing costs are all those costs related to selling of the product. Included in that certainly is mileage and travel, the time of the travel from farm to outlet. And I should say here, I'll use these terms interchangeably: market channel and outlet. I mean, officially kind of, for example, you could sell at 3 farmers markets. Those are 3 different outlets, and farmers market is the marketing channel, if you will. But a lot of people use those in kind of the same way. So they cut back and forth. I do too. So, but the time in terms of traveling and selling at that particular outlet, supplies related to an outlet. Certainly if you're selling at a farmer's market, you're buying a canopy. For those delivering CSA, we're buying a bunch of wax boxes. If you're running a farm stand, you're going to have price cards, and then they keep blowing away, so you buy more price cards, right? We have stall market fees. We do have advertising. It's certainly involved in here, and anything that else is related to a particular market channel. You'll see in some of my numbers, I even allocate some of the portion of my telephone bill, which of course, a portion of which I'm taking on my taxes, I'm allocating by market channel and market channel, because that's how I'm selling a product. So if we just look at the marketing costs for one outlet, one example would be is if we're going to a farmer's market, we have a cost of mileage. Here we have so many miles round trip at so much a mile. I'm just spitballing at $25 and at 50 cents a mile. We have supplies such as bags and the like. We know what the cost is for the whole year. We're dividing it by the total number of times we've gone to the farmer's market, and so much each Saturday at your Saturday market goes to supplies. Market fees, $125 a year. We go 15 times a year, $8 a time. The time that you are at that farmer's market, the actual selling. There's also the time in terms of travel to and from that farmer's market. And I throw lunch in here in large part because every time I go to a farmer's market on Saturday, it seems like I end up buying lunch for a family of 5, which is certainly more than $10, but this is just an example. And so what we want to do is do a marketing mix analysis for all our different outlets and compare our market channels. And so in this instance, we're not worried about production costs. Just in order to make kind of a clean analysis. Otherwise, we could drive ourselves crazy in terms of how many pounds of tomatoes did we sell at the market versus the CSA, and what were the costs of those tomatoes. We're not even going there. We're just trying to get a sense about what are those costs to market the product, market channel by market channel. And what we're looking to get at is what is that percent return over those marketing costs to kind of have an apples to apples comparison across our different outlets or market channels. So here's what this looks like. Again, this is not me. I'll show you some of my numbers in a bit, but this is just a mythical farm that has 5 market channels or 5 outlets. They go to 2 different farmers markets, a farm stand, they sell directly to a grocery, and they sell to a school. And what we see here is we have total revenue at the top and the number of times, days or times that you went in order to get that revenue. Below that, we see the marketing costs, a total at the top for the whole season, and that's broken down per day down below. What we're doing with the marketing mix analysis is we're taking our total revenue and we're subtracting out our marketing costs for that whole season. So in Farmers Market 1, we're taking that $2,000 total sales. We're subtracting out those marketing costs of $1,056 in order to get a net return of $944. That's our return over marketing costs. And so to do that, we're doing basically gross margin. And what we're doing is we're taking that net return and we're dividing it by our total sales at the top. So we're taking 900. Oh yeah, thank you. That's a great idea, Steve. Yeah, thank you. So what we're doing is we're taking that 944 and we're dividing by 2,000 to get that 47% kind of gross margin. And so the way we'll think about that is for every dollar we're taking in at that farmer's market, we're keeping 47 cents. And so forth. We do that across all these different outlets. And so we see Farmers Market 1's at 47, Farmers Market 2, 23%. The farm stand's the big winner, where we're keeping 80 cents of every dollar coming in because we have very low marketing costs. And then the grocery and the school. Now, a couple things that I'd like to point out in terms of considerations, kind of put this is just one way of looking at only at how you're selling things. There are certainly some other considerations when you're making a decision about how you're selling things. And so a couple of things I do want to emphasize to kind of put this into context. When we're doing a marketing mix analysis, we're not looking at production costs, right? To some degree, we're dealing with pricing, but we're not explicitly bringing that into play. So it is pricing certainly is a factor, but it's not very explicit in this situation. So my example is if we had a wholesale market and we did a marketing mix analysis, we might have very low marketing costs. And so that number at the bottom, maybe we're keeping 70 cents of every dollar, 80 some cents of every dollar. But in that analysis, we're not taking into consideration it takes twice the amount of product at a lower price to get those sales. To some degree, it deals with pricing in large part because it is a profitability measure, right? Second consideration is this issue about we're not very explicit about the time by market channel. In this instance, I'm really thinking about time in terms of your post-harvest handling. I did make that explicit in some of my analysis, but that's something in our previous example that wasn't included. A very simple way of doing this is to leave post-harvest handling per market channel out. If you have the ability to bring that in, I do think it's beneficial to get a feel for how much time is being invested to harvest for that market channel. And it's a bit debatable whether you should, in large part because it sort of depends on when you define a product. Is it a finished product only after it is now washed and packed? That is post-harvest handling a marketing cost, or is post-harvest handling time a production cost? I think that's a debatable thing. And lastly, the consideration is how these channels fit together. We would love to see how if you have multiple marketing channels, how they do complement one another. And I'll tell a little bit about my own and how they complement. And at the end of the day, this last point is I think we should I should emphasize is you could do this, and if you're thinking about marketing channels and how to sell things, you could forever just keep adding new outlets and marketing channels. At some point, there is a very real limit of time. So when you are looking at a marketing mix analysis such as here, if to sell to these 5 outlets, it's taking 80 some hours a week. I'm sorry, you need to drop something, because it's very difficult to just sell for deal with these marketing costs 80 some hours a week. So that's certainly one consideration. My own experience is this is what my market channels look like since 2004. Since we've been up here, we've been at the same Saturday farmers market, and so that's one of my longest running market channels. Also since 2004, we've been operating a CSA, and so what does that make me? This is my 14th season coming up here, and so those are our 2 longest running market channels. We also have a self-serve farm stand at the end of our driveway, and I also have a couple off-site farm stands at this point. One on both of which are on consignment. One on the right is in a healthcare facility in a hospital, and on the left I actually do consignment with a kind of an artisan bakery, which loves having our produce just because their customers like having our produce there. The one thing I like to emphasize is that I've always found combining market channels to be complementary. The way it works in my own life is we're always harvesting for a CSA on a Friday. We're pack-in delivering on that Friday. And actually in doing that pack-in delivering, we are readying ourselves. Whatever's extra not going in the CSA box is going to this, going to the farm stand, the farmer's market. Whatever's left over there from the farmer's market immediately goes back at 2 p.m. on Saturday to that farm stand. Certainly greens and stuff don't do so well on a self-serve farm stand in the summer. And some of that could even be held over as we ready ourselves to deal with the farm stands earlier in the week, when we deliver on a Monday and a Tuesday to these other 2. So certainly I think there's a lot to be said about thinking about, in terms of our outlets and market channels, how they can complement one another. Because I always say, sometimes we get hung up on pricing a lot. I always say, no matter the price, if we spend a lot of time, energy, and effort in raising a pepper, a sold pepper is better than one that rots in the field. So having multiple marketing channels allows us multiple opportunities to sell the pepper in which we have some sunk costs, right? We're sinking costs in production. We want to get those things sold. This is what it's looked like. I only had the best numbers I could dig up. These are my actual numbers from 2 years ago. And so, and from the three of our major market channels, our CSA, our farmers market, our farm stand. It's a little bit of a busy slide, but let me see if I can get this guy. So just to orient you a little bit, we have our total sales at the top. And as you see here, we brought in what is our post-harvest labor. We did it on a per trip basis so that we could get down to this cost. I just valued myself at $10 an hour. You could value yourself at 15, 20, 100, whatever you want. But you do want to do it across the board just so you have an apples to apples comparison. In terms of our total time that we're putting in, market channel by market channel, we have our mileage cost here at 57 cents a mile, which was the mileage for that year, 2015. As you see here, the farm stand has no mileage cost because I just walk down the driveway and put stuff on a farm stand. And then as you see here, we have all of our direct expenses allocated market channel by market channel. We see our packing supplies, marketing and advertising. If there's any kind of office cost, as you see, I allocated a telephone expense according to the time I spend, say, dealing with CSA members. Also in my telephone expense, I do take a portion of my internet costs. We do a fair amount of marketing through internet and email correspondence. Labor here would be as if you paid somebody to, say, stand at that farm stand or stand at your farmer's market and do selling for you. And you see a total of direct expenses. And so as you see here, we have our total marketing costs, and just like I showed you in the other one, a gross margin, where it's quite clear that our farm stand is performing well in terms of just looking at marketing costs. We're keeping 82 cents of every dollar. Second to that is our CSA, and lastly is our farmers market. I would note here that we do have some fairly high costs. Since 2015, doing this kind of analysis, we've made some changes. One is we've had a fairly large mileage cost, in large part because still in 2015, we were doing direct delivery, direct to home in our sparsely populated rural area, which takes a fair amount of miles. And it also takes, as you see here, 7 hours per trip between my wife and myself transporting vegetables around each week. After 2015, here, let's see, actually starting in 2017, this was our very first year, because of these numbers and the costs related to that, here in 2017, we've moved to a drop site situation where we've more than cut this number of transportation time in half, and our mileage cost more in half. So give you an indication about when you're doing this kind of analysis, you're identifying those things that really stand out as large costs, and you can do something about those individual costs. I didn't look at this and say, oh my goodness, this CSA doesn't have a high enough gross margin, I'm now going to stop doing CSA. No, I said, okay, what's the cost here? What's sinking my ship? How could I get that 59% to 70%, or how could I get 59% a little bit better, maybe to 65 or 67%? Well, let's deal with this transportation cost that we have and this time in transporting, and that's one way we've used this to change this. Looking to 2018, actually, it's pretty much final in our conversation here at the farm that we will, in terms of changing our marketing mix, we are, after 14 seasons, dropping a farmer's market we've been at for a very long time. As you see, $8,000, it's always bounced between $8,000 and $10,000 a year. We typically go anywhere between 11 and 15 times a year. So it certainly is bringing in some sales. However, just when we start tallying up all the costs to doing the farmer's market, there certainly are some significant marketing costs. But another consideration for ourselves is doing the farmer's market coming right out of the CSA is actually kind of crazy making. I don't know if it's because I'm now 40. It just sort of wears me out. And so, again, we have these numbers on the spreadsheet that we're looking at to try to make a decision. But some of these other considerations about, boy, is this really working for me and my family, and how does this work in the course of my week, is an important thing to think about. Quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we learned about with my day job on this analysis that we did in central Minnesota. You can find, if you just look Pesch vegetable benchmarks, you should be able to find this report. Or maybe Steve has a way of getting it out, but we have two reports, one for the 2014 season, one for the 2015 season, where we did some benchmarking in costs, both production costs and marketing costs here. And so we're trying to take a look at what were people's returns by market channel as well as by acre. And overall, we saw some pretty comparable sales per acre from year 1 to year 2. And this was a study done with 11 producers 1 year and 10 producers another year. Not a huge N, but if you've done any of this work or been asked to do any of this work, it's actually really hard to get some Midwesterners to say, yeah, I'm going to talk about every last dollar that came into my farm and every last dollar that went out of my farm to do a really good enterprise analysis, income statement, and balance sheet, right? It's sort of a financial turn and cough situation. We did have some change in net return per acre from 1 year to another. I don't want to dig into that too much. In the second year, we did ask people explicitly about their marketing costs, as well as their time spent in post-harvest per market channel. And we asked that for farm stands, wholesale, including food hubs in this instance, or if you're selling directly to a broker, direct to restaurant, direct to grocery, direct to institution, CSA, and farmers market. And when we looked at where all our sales were coming from those 11 producers, 36% of the total sales were coming from CSA, followed by farmers market. 29% wholesale was $1 and $5 spent on wholesale, earned through wholesale. 12% of sales were through farm stand, and then just one or two producers in each of these direct to grocery, restaurant, and institution. So that wasn't a large part of this. Some things that we did learn, we know this as market gardeners. It is all about labor efficiency. So for every dollar of sale, on average, across all these farms, we were spending 32 cents of every dollar. We were paying ourselves 32 cents of every dollar is really the more accurate way of saying that. 6 cents of every dollar was spent on those direct expenses, bags, boxes, market fees, things like that, and 5 cents of every dollar of sale was spent on mileage. So these are not insignificant, even if we just looked at those cash expenses of direct expenses and mileage. And when we did this analysis, this is what we found for those 11 farms, or I think maybe 10 farms in this instance, that yes, the farm stand came out, all of them were unmanned farm stands. There wasn't a paid labor component to them in terms of the return over marketing costs. The one thing that was surprising was that wholesale, it's maybe not surprising, but in terms of comparing the total sales to those marketing costs, fared pretty well and actually did better than CSA. I wouldn't put too much stock in farm institution or grocery because it's only one or two producers. Same with this one here. And our big loser were farmers markets. And again, there are other reasons to engage in these outlets. Some people say go to a farmers market because we can sort of drum up some business for our CSA shares or other things that we're doing. But if we're just doing that marketing mix analysis, this is how it shook out across those 10 farms. So lastly, and then I'm going to turn to Natasha after and I'll shut up here. What's really important, and I think Natasha is going to talk a little bit about her decision process going through this. It's important that we make decisions having done these kinds of analysis. I showed you stuff from our study. I wouldn't want you to take those things to the bank. I want you to use your numbers. Every farm is like a snowflake, right? Your numbers are your numbers. And you need to do your analysis to figure out where you're going to go, and use this to inform how you're going to change up, how you're going to sell things. All told, we want to either kill the dogs or tame the dogs, right? So there's some business school speech. And we're killing dogs, let's just think if something's performing so badly, let's just drop it. And I know that's hard for us because a lot of times we're so relationship driven. We don't want to disappoint that 85-year-old nice old lady who's been buying from us for the last 10 years. But if the outlet is a real dog and it's kind of taking more energy and money from us than it's giving us, we really ought to drop it. One thing that I like to think about is, did I give it a good effort? I've done a lot of different enterprises over the year, and I always say if I give something 2 to 3 years and it's really not working, and I don't see it working in the future, I might really consider dropping it. And that's whether I'm trying to raise chickens or operate a dairy route, what have you. The other way is taming the dogs. I showed you my example about how did we revise how we did our CSA, moving to drop sites from direct home delivery. And as a way of just saying, if there's a cost here, how can we deal with that cost or minimize that cost? And I really want everybody to just put it in the context of their overall situation. I do think that I'm sort of at the place now, 14 years in here, 13, 14 years in Otter Tail County with my current operation. I'm really in this fine tuning of my marketing mix. You can see how I'm in a much better place to say, you know what, after 14 years, I've done my duty to the farmers market. I'm comfortable with my other market channels and how sales are coming in, that I can be brave enough and drop that. I'm fine tuning my marketing mix, or I'm changing it just a little bit, I'm reforming how those costs, which is different than if you are in a startup phase and you're really needing to just grow some customers and get some good customers. I've been around a while. I've got customers. People know who I am, and it's sort of a different situation where you might stick with a bit of a dog for a while, sticking with the dog theme, because you're really needing just to connect with people and build up a base of customers. And so you can't, depending on your situation, you might tackle this in different ways. Now, a lot of you are saying, okay, yep, I don't do spreadsheets. I'm just not that well put together. I would say if you're like, hey, this is sort of blowing over my head, Ryan, and I really don't have these numbers at all. My last parting advice is now's the time to really just make sure that you're doing some decent record keeping, or splitting apart what records you do have as you're doing end of the year analysis with a chart of accounts, so that you can identify your marketing costs more clearly. I just use this old school ledger. I'm really old school because I don't like opening computers at 11 o'clock at night after farming. I can open a journal, this journal or this ledger book, and write something in it. And what would be important is you explicitly have in your chart of accounts those things related to, say, farmers market supplies, farmers market fees, those direct costs that you're doing by market channel. So that's more than enough for me, and I want to turn it over to Natasha because you're probably tired of me blabbing and my bad jokes at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Natasha, I'm pulling up your presentation now. But yeah, great work, Ryan. Appreciate that overview. I did put a link in the chat box there for that, the research report that he referenced out of the University of Minnesota. So you guys can check that out when you get a chance. But yeah, now we'll hear about Natasha's, second year at Turkey River Farm and the market analysis that she's been doing. And then we'll, again, be thinking about your questions, put them in the chat box as they come up, and we'll address those.
Thanks, Steve. Can you hear me okay? Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, sure can. Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Ryan, so much for your presentation. I just want to say that I saw your presentation at the PFI conference in January, and it was super impactful for me because our business, Turkey River Farm, is in a rural northeast corner of Iowa, and all of our markets are in a rural area, and so it was really inspiring to me to see how you were able to evaluate and kind of tailor your marketing outlets towards those rural customers, and find a way to make it work. And so I guess that's kind of what my husband and I have been all about with Turkey River Farm. So to give a little introduction, I'm Natasha Hegmann, and I'm a beginning farmer. I come into farming my own property with a little over 10 seasons of experience working for other people. I started out working for Laura Krause at Abbey Hills Farm in Mount Vernon for about 4 years during high school, and then during college for 4 seasons there. And then I worked on farms around southeast Minnesota and also around Montana. So I have quite a bit of growing experience for other people in a lot of different contexts. I've worked for nonprofits and for for-profits and grown food on university campuses. But my big caveat is that I may have the growing experience, but I am not an accountant. I'm not even particularly good with numbers. I didn't study business in college. I was actually a Spanish major in college. I've definitely never given a webinar before. So there are a lot of new things to me. And basically, I guess despite all of these things, one thing that I do have going for me in building a farm business right now is participation in the Savings Incentive Program through PFI. And I know that the deadline just passed for the Savings Incentive Program, but if anybody was thinking about it, I wanted to put a little plug out there. We A classics major, that's awesome, right? So the Savings Incentive Program is a really great PFI program, and through it we were tasked and encouraged and given the resources to create a really detailed business plan, and also enterprise budgets to get into our mission and vision as beginning farmers and think through all of those things that would hopefully lead to success. So that's kind of a basic thing that's been really impactful for me and my husband as we develop our business. And right now, we're just finishing up our second year in business, and what I'm trying to do is just grab out and find all of the different business resources that I can utilize to make our farm provide for me and for my family, and to do it within the parameters of the values that we have. So that's kind of what I'm going to share with you about today, is how we're evaluating and how that's working. So let's see if I can make this thing advance. So here, I'm going to start out by giving you a little bit of snapshot of our farm. We have 4 main enterprises. We dabble in mushroom production a little bit. We do, these are golden oyster mushrooms, and then we also raise shiitake mushrooms on logs in a wooded area on our farm in northeast Iowa. We also tap maple trees and produce pretty small scale maple syrup, but we do sell quite a bit of maple syrup at farmers market. We're not quite wholesale size. We're still pretty small, so that's a small enterprise. One of our main enterprises is raising heritage breed hogs from feeder to finish on pasture and woodlots on our farm. And that what I'm going to focus in on today is our vegetable production, because this is the area of the farm that I manage and the numbers that I know best. So that's where we're going to focus in. Then a little bit more about the context of our farm. My husband and I both farm full-time, so we're both on the farm full-time, and we have limited off-farm income, but we do work some odd jobs on the side and through the winter. Another really important thing to cover is that we have a unique land access situation. We get to farm our land rent-free. We don't own the land, but we rent it in exchange for 10 hours a week of work for a nonprofit that owns the land where we farm. So this is really cool for us. It's really unique. It has its obviously its benefits and its drawbacks, but the way I kind of think about this in terms of talking to you about profitability in our business is that for those purposes, I think of it as those 10 hours a week. I value that at about $15 an hour, which means that in our labor, or in our like sweat equity, or whatever you want to call it, we end up paying about $600 a month, or $7,200 a year for land access and for rent, basically, for our farm property for all of these different enterprises. So that's kind of the parameters and the overview of our farm. So next I'm going to touch a little bit on our mission and vision. And I might, these are, our mission and vision are something that we developed through the Savings Incentive Program, but I'm always drawn to missions and visions because I have a little bit of a background in nonprofit work, and so I think these are really important. And honestly, we use these more than I would have ever expected in our farm. Whenever we're thinking about adding on that new exciting enterprise that we just saw Farminar about and got really excited about, or if we're thinking about backing off on a different marketing outlet, what we do is we return to our mission and our vision and also our clearly stated values, and we think, how does this change fit with where we want to be on our farm and in all these different areas. So if you haven't already figured out a mission and vision, get with your farm partner or your farm team, whoever is in it with you, and I would really encourage you to think through these sorts of things because they've been really useful, a part of the decision-making process and evaluation process for us. So our mission is to provide excellent food and agricultural experiences to our community while preserving the natural resources of the land for generations to come and supporting fair and sustainable farm labor. Our vision is to reduce off-farm inputs, strategically diversify our production, and collaborate with our community to increase engagement on the land. And I'll also mention that our mission and vision for our farm business are pretty compatible with the mission and vision of the nonprofit that we run from. So that's one of the reasons that our unconventional land access opportunity works out well. So next, now that you kind of get an idea of Turkey River Farm, where we're at the end of our second year, we're both full-time, we've got a bunch of enterprises out there. Now I'm gonna dive into how we're using the tools that Ryan's laid out for us, and some things that I picked up from his presentation back in January, and things that we've talked about since, things that we've been working through to evaluate our different markets. So I'm going to talk through kind of quickly what Ryan touched on, the calculating return over marketing costs. And the first step to doing this is to start by looking at your different markets, figuring out what your markets are. So these are our vegetable markets for 2017. And again, I'm just going to focus on our vegetable markets, not get into all of our other enterprises. So we had our farmers market in Gothenburg, which was 22 Saturdays from May through October, ended up being about $7,500. We also have a traditional CSA, and I also do rural delivery, or I do rural delivery, and I thought it was a great idea from Ryan's presentation back in January, and it's been really great for us to deliver door to door for people. Our customers have been really appreciative of the convenience of having the delivery. You can see there in the picture on the right, that's our insulated delivery bag. So we don't do boxes, we do those little insulated bags with the logo printed on them, and that's brought everyone a great joy to receive those bags. We also have an Iowa City share, and this is probably one of my quote-unquote dogs, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. Iowa City is about 2 hours south of us, and you can see we bring in about $2,500 from our Iowa City CSA share, but there are a lot of other factors at play, so I'm leaving it in there, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. We also have a fall share, which is new this year. We're piloting it this year because we just started renting a high tunnel down the road, and it's allowed us to do some fall greens that we weren't able to do last year. So we're doing every week delivery, 8 weeks in October and November, and that's brought in about $2,600 this year. Then finally, we have our restaurant sales and our on-farm sales, which are comparatively a much smaller amount of the overall vegetable sales that we do at the farm. So now I'm going to walk you through how I figured out our return over marketing costs for farmers market, and we'll just go through the Gothenburg farmers market, and then I'll show you all my data and all my calculations side by side. And feel free to ask clarifying questions as we go through this if I'm going too fast, or if any of my numbers are confusing to you. So I start by figuring out the total sales, which hopefully you're keeping track of. This is something that I track in an enterprise budget, which I have found as a not number person a super useful tool, and a super accessible tool to just start tracking the numbers associated with our different enterprises, and teasing some of these, specifically marketing costs, are easy to pick apart when you have an enterprise for projecting and then putting in the actual costs of different things. So we had 22 days of market, which means that our average sales per day were about $342 for vegetables at the Gothenburg Farmers Market. So next, once you figure out how much you're bringing in, you're going to go ahead and figure out marketing costs. And these are our main marketing costs. Our display intent per day. I didn't have an actual, but I think I had a budget of about $150 per year. I think that's pretty close, that I have budgeted for new display items, tent repair, replacement. These are like baskets, bags, things like that, that you take to farmers market. So that comes out to about $6.82 per day if you divide it by those 22 days of market. And then for travel, we're lucky in that our farmers market that we've chosen to be regulars at is pretty close. It's just 25 miles away or 25 miles round trip, I'm sorry, it's about 20 minutes away. And I try to use the federal reimbursement rate to estimate my mileage. And I really like this. At first I put it into my enterprise budget and I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a huge number with my, my rural delivery route and to going to farmers markets and everything else. It was like a huge number for um, set aside for mileage. But I really like it because what it does is it builds in money for repairs and maintenance on your vehicle as well. And that's really nice if you don't buy new cars like we do, and you kind of you end up spending a bit of money on maintenance and repairs for your vehicles. So this ends up accounting for more than just your gas for travel. So I really like that. And then for time, we estimate an hour for setup at farmers market, 4 hours for the Saturday market, staffing it, and then an hour for cleanup. And since my husband and I both staff our farmers market currently, I multiply it by 2 and I value our labor at $15 an hour. So this is kind of, we could change the amount of the what we pay or what we value our time per hour, but as long as we keep it the same across all of the different marketing outlets, it doesn't really matter. Another thing is that we could choose to leave this out, but this is kind of interesting to add in, if we did choose to hire someone to represent us at farmers market or something like that, at least we would have a tangible idea of the amount of labor and the value of the labor that's going into this farmers market. So I think Ryan mentioned some other costs that you could add in that could be associated with marketing for vegetables, but we don't actually have fees for our farmers market, so our total per day ends up being about $206. So I'm looking at this question from Billy. Yeah, and what I'm showing you is just our vegetable production, right? It's just one enterprise, one component of our, right, thanks, Steve, exactly. Yep, just one enterprise of our overall farm business. Okay, so next, we're getting close to figuring out our return over costs. So next what we're going to do is figure out our net return. So you're just going to take your total sales and subtract your total marketing costs, which you figured out. And then to figure out your return over costs, you'll just take your net return, which for us is about just under $3,000, and divide it by your total sales. So you can figure out the return over costs, or our return over costs ended up being about 39% for our farmers market. So just to return to, just to clarify, the way I think of return over costs is as a measurement of how efficient we are at earning revenue through this marketing outlet, how much we get out for the energy and time that we put in. So now that we have that number, I went through and I calculated our return over costs, our net return over total sales for all of our different, oh, I guess I can use the pointer here, for all of our different marketing outlets, for our farmers market, for all of our CSAs, for our on-farm sales, and for our restaurant sales. So I can compare the total sales and the return over costs. And the first thing that I notice when I'm kind of evaluating this and looking at this is that the return over costs for our farmers market and for Iowa City CSA, remember the one where we're driving 2 hours south to deliver vegetables, are both fairly low. And these numbers make sense to me because I've factored labor into our calculations here, and I know that these two outlets are definitely heavy on the labor. They require a lot of labor from us. So that makes sense to me. Another thing that I notice is that our return over costs for on-farm sales looks pretty high. That makes sense to me because it doesn't take much from us to sell vegetables on our farm. But it's important, I guess, also to not, and I think Ryan mentioned this, as I was looking at these numbers, I was reminding myself not to just blindly follow these numbers, that they're tools. But just because I see that on-farm sales is 88% return over costs, I'm not gonna just switch my whole business over to providing roadside sales because we live, down a gravel road and away from population centers, not gonna have a lot of traffic. There's certainly some opportunity here that we could pursue. But I think it's also important to remember that the on-farm sales make up a comparatively small portion of our overall vegetable sales. So that kind of tempers my use of this data. And at the same time, if we look at our farmers market data, you can see that we have low return over costs for marketing costs for our farmers market, but that doesn't mean I'm going to drop this dog. Instead, I'm actually going to think about tweaking our farmers market situation, reducing our expenses, and now that we've been with this farmers market for a couple of years, know what people want, I'm confident that I can increase production of the kinds of products that our farmers market customers are interested in. And I think there's a lot of great opportunity to actually increase this total sales number so that we can increase our overall return over costs. So next, the return over costs is really just one tool that we can use to evaluate all these different markets, and I'm going to kind of briefly go through some of the other thought processes that Ryan has suggested thinking about, and things that have worked really well for us to think about in evaluating our different markets. So one thing I've been thinking a lot about with my end of season evaluation is potential for future growth. This is a big one for us. We have restaurants that we sell to. We could be selling more to restaurants. We could be doing more farmers markets. One thing I think about with restaurants, we have some really great deals with restaurants where we go there after farmers market and they'll just buy whatever aftermarket produce that we have. But then we have some restaurants where we see some kind of what I think of as red flags or warning signs, where you see a lot of employee turnover. You maybe see reduction of those restaurants' hours. And then if I have chefs or managers from those restaurants that are making demands on me for vegetables, those are the kinds of situations where I'm going to say, you know what, like I don't think that's a super solid market. I'm probably not going to start just like growing salad mix exclusively for that restaurant because it doesn't seem like a super stable market. There doesn't seem like a lot of potential for future growth. On the other hand, our farmers market seems like, we can't bring enough radishes and salad turnips to our Northeast Iowa farmers market. If I could just grow a lot more radishes and salad turnips, I haven't hit the limit for the number of radishes and salad turnips that we can bring to that market. So there's definitely potential future growth in that. Another factor above and beyond return over costs that works, or that I think is interesting to think about, and that Ryan kind of touched on already, is timing. And for us, that Iowa City market, driving 2 hours south to bring not very many vegetables to market, that might sound silly to a lot of folks listening. You might be saying, well, Natasha, you probably better cut that out. And I totally hear that. I hear it loud and clear, and I'm thinking the same thing. But the interesting thing is that living in a really rural area, those trips 2 hours south also allow us to schedule doctor's appointments and do our grocery shopping, visit with friends and family, see my grandma, who's pictured here, who's a big part of the reason that I have a passion for food and for growing food in the first place. And so the timing, that having that mental health break to get off the farm in the middle of the summer, just like Ryan stated, we might feel like that guy, but we don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. Like, I still want to have happy healthy relationships with the people that I love. And so I think that's really important to have, for us to have an excuse to get off, that is basically a paid for trip to go and do our grocery shopping and visit with our friends and family is actually rather valuable. The other timing thing that's more related to production and kind of the overlap of production in our markets is that we have pretty limited cold storage space. So just having multiple different marketing outlets uh, at different times of the week, having an Iowa City delivery on Monday, having our rural delivery on Thursday, and our market on Saturday allows us to have multiple different harvests and takes pressure off of our cold storage. So we're able to move more product that way. So that's really great. Another thing that I've been considering a lot as I look at our markets this year and think about the future is preparation, time, and energy. And one thing that I'm really loving is our fall CSA share. This is the first year that we've done it, but I think that it's working really well. Our customers are loving it, and I'm loving the emphasis on storage crops. Just being able to weigh out my storage crops, bag it all, cut a few greens from the high tunnel and deliver is really nice at a time of the year when we're focused on projects and evaluation and equipment maintenance and things like that. I don't want to be thinking and dealing as much with vegetables, so that seems to be fitting really nicely in with our schedule, and I'd really like to expand in that area next year. Another thing that I have been considering and that we've been considering since our first year is drama. And this also might sound silly, but to anybody who sells at farmers market, I'm sure you're familiar with this. We actually started out in our first year, we were trialing 4 different farmers markets, small town farmers markets in Northeast Iowa that were in shooting distance, or not shooting distance, but were within a reasonable distance of our farm. And we ended up choosing to stick with just our Guttenberg Farmers Market was the one that we chose. And one of the reasons that we gravitated towards it was that it was really pleasant. It's right on the banks of the Mississippi River. The market itself is on grass instead of asphalt or concrete, and for whatever reason, for me, that just makes a big difference, and I think that it makes it kind of a more relaxed setting for customers. Also, since picking the Guttenberg Farmers Market and kind of going whole hog into the Guttenberg Farmers Market, we've had a great community of people who come out every week, and whether they're buying vegetables or not. This is our neighbor, Darwin. He's well into his 80s, and he comes he's kind of a fair weather market goer, but he comes and he'll serenade us on guitar or on banjo at the farmer's market. And he just comes because he likes to hang out. And we go home from market and we feel rejuvenated and we feel centered and we feel valued in our community. We don't feel exhausted at the end of a market day. And I think that's a reasonable thing to include in your decision-making process, to put value on that. And you can't really put a number value on it, right? It's not something that you can quantify, but it's still something that I believe in considering. So next, another thing to consider that's hard to put a number value on is the complementary nature of your marketing mix, like Ryan mentioned. This is definitely something that I've been encouraged to think about because of his presentation. And our farmers market, even though it has low return over costs, we're selling a lot of other things at our farmers market that aren't in those numbers, right? We're selling our maple syrup. And this is our main face-to-face customer interaction time. We're selling maple syrup. We're also taking reservations for whole and half hogs. We're also building our CSA customer base at this farmers market, especially for our fall CSA people. We got a lot of reservations from farmers market customers. So this was really important for us this year. And then finally, Ryan suggests a gut check. Yeah, at the end of the day, what feels right. And this is where I would return to thinking about your values. And for us, our values, our mission, and our vision of our farm And we kind of consider these and we use them as parameters to work towards profitability, but also upholding the values and the lifestyle that we want. And so I think that you can do this, and I think that it's really important to be explicit about what the mission and vision are so that you can compare things side by side. So that's what I've got now, and I've gone a little bit over, but I think we still have plenty of time for questions.
Yeah, still definitely plenty of time. We didn't go over it all. I think I went over. So thank you, Natasha. That was great. Definitely plenty of time for questions. So pop them in the chat box. I don't know, Ryan, if you have any questions or thoughts or comments for Natasha initially. I think I might actually take Natasha's slides back a few to look at the yeah, here we go. Let's look at this if we can. This might spur some discussions. Oh, Kathy, thank you for asking. That's a great reminder. Let me pop that survey link back in the chat box.
I just want to, this is Ryan again. I just want to emphasize, I think, Natasha, your thinking on this is right on, and the way I like to use this tool as well. We put the numbers up there in terms of our return over costs, but at the end of the day, we say there's all these other pieces of the puzzle, right? And I think you hit on a lot of them. Hey, how does this currently fit in your life and your current values? 2, this issue about schedule. You can't look on the spreadsheet and see how each of these things interrelate and might complement one another. If all of your outlets end up being on a Friday and a Saturday and a Sunday, and you spend 5 days doing good farm work, but you're maybe throwing good product out because you're unable to hold it, it might be very beneficial to have a Tuesday market of some sort. And lastly, I just remark that I think you made a great point when you talked about your farmers market sales. Maybe the return over cost don't look that great right now, or comparison to others, they don't look great. But you're right. I think everybody should know that these marketing costs in many respects are fixed. So your solution was, hey, I'm only at 39% return over marketing costs, but I know I can bring that sales number up. And after 2 years in a place, you probably have a good sense whether you're able to punch up those numbers or not, right? And since that marketing cost is fixed, obviously that return over cost is going to go up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. And yeah, I do think, one of the reasons that we're hanging on to farmers market right now is because we really see a lot of potential for growth in that area. Another thing that I was thinking about as I was preparing this is that we, until in our first 2 years, none of my production planning has been focused on farmers market at all, because when we originally developed our business plan and we were thinking about our farm, I thought that we were going to be CSA farmers. I thought that 90% of our business was going to be in a CSA. And I think this was because I was working on a farm with, 3 urban farmers markets and feeling really burnt out on farmers markets and not interested in farmers markets. And so my dream farm was really focused on CSA, and that's really where I wanted to go. But since we've been, living our, actual day-to-day lives, we've found through trialing farmers markets that's, we've at least got to start there to build a customer base before we can really grow our CSA. So now I'm thinking about basically what we've been doing is selling whatever extra produce we have from our CSA at farmers market. And now I'm starting to think, okay, I have enough idea of what product moves well at farmers market that I can tweak my production quite a bit to sell more products that do well at farmers market, and still have plenty enough to serve my CSA customers.
Yeah, absolutely, Natasha. That's how I think about it too. What's left over from the CSAs becomes farmers market product. Kind of relates to Kathy's question here. Is it possible some of your farmers market customers become CSA members? Yes, over the 13 years I've been at that market, that's certainly been the case. Although, if you hear, as I've talked about dropping my farmers market, at this point, I pretty much attract them independent. It was much more so the case earlier. And so I don't know if you have a thought on that, Natasha. Have you Have you picked up some customers directly from farmers that became CSA customers directly from the farmers market?
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, gosh, Ryan, your first slide with the map and thinking, in a rural area, how all of your different, a dollar, this marketing outlet is not a dollar equal to a dollar at this other marketing outlet. So we kind of have different CSA, ideas that we market to people in different areas because we don't want to provide everything to everybody. So our that farmers market total sales that you see there actually includes one like quote unquote CSA program that we do, which is our farmers market CSA, which is basically a tab that people buy into at the beginning of the season, and then they come and shop our farmers market on their tab. So definitely we've had people move over from last year being farmers market customers to this year being farmers market CSA customers. We haven't gotten into even really advertising our CSA as much at our farmers market, just because it's kind of a hard area for us to add on to our delivery route. But I think there's definitely potential for that. And more than anything, we've added a lot of pork customers. We get a lot of pork customers from our farmers market, also from our CSA. There's a lot of overlap.
And you'd made mention of fall crops and winter shares. We both do winter shares and fall shares as well. And in part, it's the timing. I have definitely sold fall shares at the farmers market recently. That's something we've been just doing the last few years. In part because of the timing, right? People know you through the course of the summer. You have something right there on your booth. You sell them on for sales in the fall. Whereas I need people to sign up by March, and I'm not sitting at a farmer's market stand in February, typically. I do want to...
Absolutely.
I do want to get to Billy's question just because it's been there a little bit. Just to be clear, Billy, Lida Farm, we are certified organic. So non-GMO, certified organic. So this is our 5th season. If you wanted to.
And we are not certified organic. We're not conventional either. I try to avoid synthetic inputs, but we're not certified organic.
Okay, that's good.
Natasha, I was curious too with your pork enterprise. What marketing outlets do you have for that? So it sounded like you sell, or at least you take orders at the farmers market for whole and half hogs. Do you do any of the sales with restaurants or on-farm sales, or what are the other outlets for that? First part of the question.
Great question. And I do not at all manage the sales and marketing for our pork, so I'll give you my best information, but if anybody really wants the right information on it, they can reach out to us, and my husband, Peter Kerns, has got the numbers for our pork business. We market whole, half, and then we also have 35-pound sampler packs, which actually ends up being basically a quarter of a hog for people. That's mostly for folks who don't have big freezers or aren't used to buying hogs direct from farmers. So we do have some restaurants, and we have one butcher actually in downtown Chicago, a specialty butcher. They're mostly kind of high-end markets, and then we sell some hogs at farmers market, and then a lot of our other pork sales come through social media, through our contacts and our networks, I guess. I'm trying to think. That's basically how we've created demand for our pork, I guess.
Yeah, okay. So
I would chime in a little bit on this, that Natasha did all this stuff related to the vegetable sales by market channel, and certainly if all we were concerned about is how our own farm is making a market channel profitable, one way of doing that, of course, is enterprise, it's diversification, right? So if we have these fixed costs for a certain farmer's market, if we can sell 4 products instead of just 1 product, is another way of upping those sales. Like Natasha was talking about before, is another way of, if you're sinking in money into these costs, you should maximize the return.
And that's one of the reasons, like early in the season, when we go to the first few farmers markets, we might not have a lot of vegetables, but when we can advertise reservations for pork, and when we have our shelf-stable maple syrup that is like no risk for us to bring to farmers market at all. We're not bringing home produce that's going to rot in the cooler or whatever. That always feels like a really smart thing to me to be doing, whether or not it is.
Right, yeah, and so that's why I was just wondering, I guess if there were enough market outlets for your other enterprises to do something like this for each enterprise, and then kind of look at them together. And like you mentioned, that farmers market, you're okay with that 39% return over cost because of the sales from your other enterprises, and that just makes so much sense. And Ryan mentioned to pay attention to those outside factors, but it sounds like, Ryan, maybe you guys are pretty just focused on vegetable enterprise, right? And you don't have like eggs or meat or any other sort of products that you'd benefit from some of the weaker outlets.
Yeah, I think it just has to do with my maturing as a grower. I've essentially done all of them at some point. I've done broilers. I've did hogs for 6 odd years. I've done cut flowers. Heck, I milked a cow for 3 years. I didn't sell that product directly at a farmer's market. That would be illegal in Minnesota. But boy, I ended up connecting with some people that came to the farm and bought raw milk. So for myself, over time, again, I don't know if as you age, you focus more. But I have just found that it is just certainly more profitable for me to do vegetables better and just chop out all other enterprises in order just to focus.
Yeah, great. We do still have a little time here, though. If anybody's got questions, feel free to get them in the chat box.
We either did a great job explaining things, or we've just exhausted this.
Yeah. Too thorough.
Too thorough. Yeah. Spreadsheets can only get people so excited here. Tuesday night before Thanksgiving, people are now, looking in their cookbooks for how they're going to prepare a turkey, and that's totally understandable.
But this is a really great analysis. If people are tracking their own, sales records, anybody can put this together and start to evaluate their, their marketing channels. So I hope people are gonna take this home and open up their Excel sheets and start crunching their own numbers and evaluating what works for them.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to mention actually, is that after attending Ryan's workshop at the PFI conference, I was kind of overwhelmed, not just from Ryan's workshop, but all of my takeaways from the PFI conference were great, and it's a lot of information, and it was really cool to have this time set aside to just kind of dive into the numbers. And I was pleasantly surprised that I could sit down in 30 minutes or 45 minutes and just figure out these return over costs numbers actually surprisingly quickly, and it was not that overwhelming of a thing to do. So I think it's pretty accessible to anybody who's looking to evaluate these different factors.
I think that's a good point. And even if you have shoddy records at this point, I think you could do this analysis. I think that's, for me, that's anybody can say, okay, let's picture that Saturday farmers market and what are the costs associated with that. Even if you don't have good receipts and records, you can do a pretty darn good estimate of it and do this comparison relatively quickly. I think our challenge as market gardeners is that there's all these other levers where we, to do a really true enterprise analysis in a market garden situation, we almost have to go crop by crop, and that just sounds like the stickiest wicket that anybody could ever think of, and it just completely just blows up people's minds, and they're just like, I can't figure it out, and you walk away. This one you can do.
This is easier, yeah. I was even thinking when I was preparing for this, I was thinking about questions that people would have and who would be attending, and I was thinking about any beginning or prospective farmers out there who are like planning for their first year or just getting into it. And I was thinking that this would even be a useful tool if you were someone who is, trying to think about different marketing mixes and trying to plan a future farm, or which marketing outlets to get started in. I think that you could project some of these numbers, and maybe they wouldn't be super accurate, but you could at least try, and it would give you some sort of baseline, or like a parameters to fill in your own baseline data against. So that's just something to think about too, if anybody out there is just getting started.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yep, and that's some great advice to probably wrap this up on. Actually, it looks like we've exhausted the questions in there. So so Natasha, it's clear that you put a lot of thought into all this. So thanks a lot for sharing your numbers and sharing your insight. We really appreciate you taking the time to crunch this stuff and then let us all learn about it. And Ryan, of course, it's great to have you back teaching us again about about our market analysis. So we'll let our Minnesota presenters get back to the bitter Arctic cold up there again. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for our presenters. This was a great presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Ryan.
Thanks all. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's right. Happy Turkey.
Happy Thanksgiving.